Hello everyone and welcome to the 6th episode in my Materialize CSS mini-series. Now this is going to be a fairly short episode, or I believe a fairly short episode, where we are basically wrapping up all of the Sidenav custom CSS and adding kind of the extended navbar, which technically, half and half. It's technically part of the navbar, not the side nav, but I just felt more comfortable adding it after we had the side nav, just because the example used it. But yeah, this will be somewhat of a, I guess, somewhat of a side thing. This is part of the nav bar. This is the actual side nav thing that we're doing. And of course, we'll do a quick recap before that. So we have this. Now, as per usual, I will always have now this kind of agenda here always showing, and we'll just see how that turns out. So I'm going to go ahead and quickly pull up our documentation before we do our recap. So that's always Materialize CSS. And then we can come to the CSS section, or actually it's under components, and then navbar. And this is our kind of documentation that we can follow, and specifically the mobile collapse button section is what we will be using for reference, anything for Sidenav. So I'm going to go ahead and recap by opening up our index.html, and I'm going to kind of take this and push it to the top by doing that, and that will push this to the bottom. I'll resize this accordingly, that way we have a little kind of running to-do list of what we're doing, and then we have our code here. I'm going to change this sizing a little bit. Okay. So this is basically where we left off. I'm going to hit the Go Live button to start up our web server. So yeah, this is what we had. We had the Hello World here in the little icon demonstration, and then we had our simple navbar with the brand logo somewhat in the center, and then we had our hamburger menu here on the left side. And if we click it, it opens up. Now, actually, I'm actually forgetting quite a few, I guess, topics, but or actually no. So this, as you can see here, this hamburger kind of will appear when the screen gets below a certain size, and it'll disappear when the screen is big enough. So what we can actually do is we can first set our side nav to side nav hiding main links. Yeah. We're going to cover that really quick. So I'm just kind of coming up with extra topics that I kind of missed in the previous episode. But in terms of the recap, yeah, we just have this navbar here that basically houses all of our links. And then we have the side nav, which is this separate UL here that should, that basically holds all of the same links that will be shown here on the left side. And then we have the actual Sidenav trigger icon right here with a class of Sidenav trigger. And the way that we actually get this whole thing to be interactive, because if you didn't realize, again, clicking a button and making something happen, like a menu pulling out, is actually interactivity, and that is done through the JavaScript portion of Materialize, where they basically handle a majority of the work by just calling. We just need to call this function m.sidenav.init, and then they'll run all of their JavaScript that handles actually making this happen, which is pretty cool. So that's where we left off in the previous episode. And then just starting here, I want to go over hiding our main links when the side nav shows, because this is not very standard. Normally when this little side nav hamburger menu pops up, well, normally on the website we just have our brand logo and then we have the links. But when the side nav actually pops up, normally these will all be hidden away, or at least these links here will be hidden away, that way we don't see them. So we can basically use those, just close those. We can basically use the utility classes that we covered a couple episodes ago. It's under the helper classes or helpers section in CSS here. And we can actually scroll down to find the hiding/showing content section. So in here, we have an access to a bunch of different hiding classes. And what we can do is, as you can see here, we have the main UL. this main UL with the align right kind of class is all of these links here. And what we can do is we can simply add a hide on medium and down. And by doing that, notice, first it's going to mess up our side nav a little bit, but that doesn't matter too much because we will fix that shortly. But now you can see that we have our links here, but when the screen gets medium and the side nav shows up here in the middle of our brand logo, the links actually disappear, and that's what we want. We want the links to only be accessible through the hamburger menu. So now let's work on fixing this. So of course, to kind of troubleshoot, you always want to open up your inspect element and kind of find the area where this is all happening. So just inspecting the DOM tree here, we can click on this div class nav wrapper and check out the styles, which I realized when I was editing that you can't really see it, so I'll pull this up a bit. So we have kind of a position relative, height 100, display flex, justify content center, so we actually set that. And then the problem is for whatever reason, this hamburger menu is skewing to the center. So what if we come here to this A and we add a style, because we can actually add custom styles, and this is for testing mainly. And we can just say margin right auto, and if I do that, that'll basically push the link over. And I think the reason for that is, for some reason, the kind of site is not including this as part of our flexbox per se, which I'm actually not fully sure why. It might be because of these transforms. So I wonder what happens if I put none, which is probably actually a better value for these transforms. So let me try doing that first and seeing if that actually changes anything, and it didn't. So, for whatever reason, again, the Flexbox layout is kind of ignoring this brand logo here. And I guess for our purposes, just for this tutorial purpose, if I was actually building a site, I would further investigate and fix it. But for now, this works fine. As you can see, this site actually never collides with anything as long as we put this margin right auto here on this A. So let's go ahead and add that here. So we have the A, and it's the Sidenav trigger, aka, well, yeah, that's the main way we can select this. So let's go ahead and just open up our style.css. Simply, we need to add a Sidenav trigger kind of selector, and we just need to say margin. And I'm going to quickly not save this yet. I'm going to reload. Remember, we had this in the center, but now I can say margin right auto, and that should, in theory, at least, that should fix it. But whoops, I'm getting a little bit of, I guess, lag or something. Let me just see what's going on. Did I not spell Sidenav trigger correct? Okay. There seems to be something wrong. So let's just reopen. So we can click on the Sidenav trigger, and we can see margin right auto is actually being overwritten because there is another margin right that's kind of overtaking it. So I'm just going to quickly find that here. And I'm wondering why it's getting overwritten. Margin right 18 pixels, and that's getting set by Materialize, which I can assume is getting set with an important tag, which is not generally recommended, and I can't actually read this. But there is a concept in CSS called the important tag where you can actually add an exclamation important, and notice after I did that, it actually forced it to move over. And basically, is CSS important is, it's too annoying to kind of explain here, but basically it'll make it so that your style will take precedent over all other styles. And the way CSS kind of works is if I put margin right, margin right, maybe 5 pixels here, and then I remove the important, notice, nothing will change because that other one has important. But normally I would set margin right to 5 pixels, but then writing it again right after will actually overwrite this current value that we set. So any styles that come later will always kind of take precedence unless a style has important. Then in which case, if I actually go back to the previous example, if I put important here, Now notice this style will, let me increase it to kind of show you 200 pixels. So now that's moving it over here. If I put important here, even though there's more styles that come after, this one will still take precedence unless I also add important to this. And this is why this is a very annoying kind of thing, because once you add important, you really can't kind of, the only way to override an important is to use another important. So, you know, you never generally want to use them unless you absolutely have to, which in this case, since Materialize is kind of overriding us, we have to add important here in order to achieve what we want. But overall, this is the style that will force the navbar to move over to the left. So yeah, that is the Sidenav hiding main links that went on a little bit of a tangent, but we're good now. And I guess the next kind of topic is figuring out a way to style our side nav itself. And let's go ahead and just take a look how we can select this. So we can actually select the UL using the class of Sidenav. And let's go ahead and try that. We can say .sidenav. And we can just make sure that it's working by giving a background color of red and saving that. And that, yep, let's go ahead and comment that out because that doesn't look very good. But so we know it's working now. And we can say Sidenav. And what if we wanted to, for example, give our instead of making these like squares, but for whatever reason we wanted to make them rounded rectangles, we could basically say Sidenav and then the LIs. We could actually select the LI elements that are inside our Sidenav, which are right here, and we can actually say Sidenav LI and give them a border radius, which will make them curved of maybe 40 pixels, just so we can see it. And then what if we gave them a border? This is just so I can actually see if this is working. 1 pixel solid, black. Okay, so that's the border. And I'm trying to figure out why the background is not. And this is actually a good little practice here. So as you can see here, when I hover over, the background, even though it's outside of the border, is still being kind of lit up. And I want to see why that is. So I'm going to go ahead and select, and select. And I wonder if it's the background on this thing that's being selected. So the way you can test that is you can open up this HOV and then you can click on hover, and that will actually automatically do that. And actually I can see that it's causing a change in the A itself, not the LI. So that's the problem here. So what we can do is we can actually, instead of selecting the LI, we can select the A itself. And now, which is cool, is we can basically, as you can see here, we've made them little, basically little rounded rectangles, and I can reduce the border radius to 20 or maybe to 10 even, just to make them closer to rectangles. And of course, I can add some margin. So if I add some margin, which it uses top right, bottom left. So let's just add a small top margin of 10 pixels and then a right margin of 10 pixels. And actually what happens is, or a right margin of 20 pixels. And what happens if we leave out bottom and left is basically this top margin will instead become the vertical margin for top and bottom. And then the right margin will actually become a horizontal margin for both right and left, as you can see here. So now we've kind of customized our side nav to, instead of being that those squares, we've now kind of made it rectangly, which this definitely looks pretty interesting. And we can actually add some more cool styles, which I will quickly go over because I technically haven't covered this yet. But if we come here to the Materialize documentation and then come to the buttons section, which is under components and buttons, there's actually this whole, as you can see when I click, there's this wave effect, and you can basically get that by doing waves effect, waves light. And if I add those to these A classes here, so basically on each of the side nav A's, I'm going to add a class of waves effect and waves light. And now notice when I open and I click, it's very subtle actually now that I see, but basically it is creating a waves effect. And what I can do to kind of change make it more noticeable is I can copy this selector here and I can change the hover property. So when you're hovering over the links, and instead of, because what it's doing is it's actually giving it a background color that's a little bit, has a little bit less opacity. we can actually give it a background instead of an RGB of maybe 200, 200, 200, and that should create somewhat of a similar effect. And as you can see now, when we click, it's more noticeable. And I can actually make this slightly lighter, maybe 220, 220, 220, which will create that little hover effect. So now we have this cool hover effect on our Sidenav. So that is basically adding custom CSS to make it look better. This isn't necessarily better, but this is an example of what you can do to basically override what Materialize gives us. So that's Sidenav custom CSS. Now I think I'm actually running late again, so you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and just not. We're gonna cancel this feature, like just by striking it out. But the gist of an extended navbar, and the reason why I am deciding to cancel it is I've actually never used this feature. I've used Materialize a ton. It was the first framework I learned, but I've never used an extended navbar just because I never saw a point. If you do have an interest in it, I highly recommend. This will be good exercise. You come here to the documentation, go to the navbar page, and simply you can copy this code. You can copy and paste it straight to your website if you want. I highly recommend you instead kind of copy it by hand instead of just doing Control-C, Control-V. And actually, as you write it out, like see, okay, nav extended, nav wrapper. So we have a nav class with this extended, and that seems to be what makes this extended. And then we have the wrapper, which is the main nav. And then we have another div with nav content, and this is where all of our tabs are. So that's how we can see like, okay, so this is how the tab system works, and these are the divs that are kind of showing all of these test messages. So, you know, it's a good exercise to kind of learn on your own using the documentation that Materialize provides. So we'll just cancel this and make this kind of a, in fact, I'm gonna go ahead and just do kind of like on your own practice. So something like that. And I'll remove the checkbox. It'll just be a bullet point. So I'll put on your own practice is extended navbar, which I can just remove that. So, you know, that's something that you can look into on your own if you want. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to show in this video. If you want to see more videos like this, I will be covering quite a few more topics, I think. There still is the other components such as buttons. I'm going to go more into detail. Cards, I use those a lot. Floating action buttons, I use a bit. Footers, which, you know, footer I might not cover in too much detail, maybe one video or maybe a mention in a video just because it's similar to navbars. Footers are generally also made with Flexbox. Pagination might be cool to look at, and then I'm going to go through a bit of this JavaScript because the collapsible is pretty cool. The modals are awesome because basically a modal is where you click on something and it pulls up a separate card here and it darkens the background. That's really cool thing that Materialize provides, and just, you know, a bunch of these little features and form features as well. So there's still quite a bit of content to cover. Materialize is a pretty big framework, and that's why I like it. And it basically provides a lot of room for customizing the features and functionality, which, you know, some people will take as it's not a fully fleshed out framework. It's half baked. Some people don't like it for that, but I definitely like it because it provides a kind of a foundation to build off of to build pretty cool websites fast, which is awesome. So yeah, that's enough of my little tangent there. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications whenever I post new videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.